Good morning. Today is December 6th, 2018. Clear Passage Prayer Line. The title of the message today is Thy Will. The title of the message today is Thy Will Be Done. And that's the subtitle. The title is God Has to Move or There Is Nothing. God has to move or there is nothing. So we're going to start by reading, Gloria's going to read her two scriptures, and then we'll come back and read the rest of the scriptures later. And the reason this is so important, this is like a single one-time revelation on where, when you wonder where things are leading or heading, when people make plans, when you see rich men plan out their life, or you see people that are working on a selfish agenda plan out their life, they're creating a road. And when they get to the end of the road, you're going to either have something that you're satisfied with that's fulfilling your life, or you will have an emptiness. And the emptiness can be recreated over and over again. When you exclude God, you create the void. So we're going to talk about the first void that happens, and that same void that happened, that moved on the face of the earth, that void will move in the lives of people when God's not in it. So you can have all of the money, the car, and all the supposedly friends. You can have the places to live. All, and you've heard ball players, you've heard billionaires, you've heard people talk about, well, I have all this stuff and I still feel empty. I actually feel more empty with the stuff than I did without the stuff, because if God has to move or there's nothing in your very life. If God doesn't move in it, and if He doesn't give you something there's not a deep love and a passion to move forward, and you're not helping other people, and there's life in that process, but God has to move. And if He doesn't move, all roads lead to the same ending. It leads to a very dismal, shallow nothingness. You saw where Howard Hughes had all this money, and he wound up isolating himself to a room and wound up being almost like an animal, like Nebuchadnezzar was. You saw, you've seen the habits of very wealthy people. They get very selfish and cantankerous and attempting to control other things through the money, and it doesn't bring them any satisfaction. And it's the only thing that brings joy in any life. So when you're telling people about the Lord, sometimes people get preoccupied because they have an 8 to 5 job, or they're doing something that brings them satisfaction. But when you are serving others, when you are loving others, when you are doing things that are God-like, and you are doing things that are fall under the umbrella of the Almighty, then you feel satisfaction in that. But then you get real satisfaction, real purpose, and real drive in your life when you do the things that God is telling you to do, and you go according. His will is done in your life. With Thy will be done is the message. Thy will be done in your life. In your life, like it says, on earth as it is in heaven. You say and you put your name in there, in Althea as it is in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven. You are the earth version. You're the earthly vessel. So on earth as it is in heaven, in you as it is designed and planned in heaven. The plans of God manifest in your life as He has plans. If you don't do His plans, it's a zero. It's a zero-sum game. There's nothing happening. If God's will is not performed in your life, all the rest doesn't even matter. Because what happens is people look on the outside and go, oh, I want this, I want to look that, but there's before you get to the outside, all the trappings, the material things, there has to be there has to be seeds and kernels of absolute joy and satisfaction before you get the other stuff. And the reason that is so important, because we're harvesting, and we don't want to get ahead where the gift, we put more emphasis on the gift than the gift giver. So that when we are processing and moving in life, it all has no meaning unless God is in it. Unless God is moving you and waking you up in the morning and talking to you throughout the day, and you're into the conversation when you lay your head back down on the pillow unless God is in it 24/7. If He is not absorbing your life, if He's not in it, you won't. You will be have momentary things, but all the inroads, the end result will be emptiness. And we have seen. We're gonna do the scriptures, but the process of getting what you want versus getting what God wants for you is what we're talking about here. Sometimes you put your will and you think, okay, I want that thing, whatever that is. And if you get that thing without God, that being part of His plan, then the end of it will be just a box. The inside won't matter. You'll just have the outside, but there's no inside. There's no joy. There's no peace. There's no movement that happens where you are excited. Now we have joy unexplainable. We have peace that cannot be defined. The source. If someone were to ask you what the source was, you could only give the source of that peace to God. Credit for the peace is the Lord's peace, but it's illogical peace. So it's not based on a thing. It's not based on something that's coming through the physical. It is all coming through the spiritual. The reason that's so important is because you can now set your path to understanding that unless the Lord is in it, it is not, nothing happened. Unless God said it, everything else will go to dust. It doesn't even matter. It's only what He says that has the extenuating life. It's to Him. What He does is what actually moves. And the enemy tries to say, I'll give you this. He can give you nothing. He can't take anything away from you. He can't process anything. Even the attacks are temporary, and those things are overcome, and those always lead to bigger victories. But life itself, the happiness, the thing that brings you the greatest joy is when you align your life up to what God tells you to do. If God doesn't move, it is a sum zero. If He doesn't move it forward, if He's not in it, then it's nothing. So we're going to go. I wanted Gloria to go ahead and read your two scriptures. And this first one, when you read in Genesis 1:2, when she's talking, and if you could read it twice, Gloria, that would be great. The first time, just hear it. The second time, the second time, hold on one second. Hold on. The second, I just put it on mute. Gloria, you can. I'll pull you off of. You can come. I'll pull you off of mute. But when you are reading the second one, then you guys are imagining the instead of the earth, talking about the earth, think about your life. Think about your life. Think about if you have, before we even go there, think about if you actually don't have any financial problems, you actually have your bills are paid, but you don't have any, but just think about it. There's no love, there's no joy, there's no fruit of the Spirit. What do you actually have? And those are demonstrations of God. If you don't have that in your life, then when He says, when he talks about the darkness was on the face of the earth, think about what's happening. What is a life without the fruit of the Spirit and without the presence of God? What do you actually have? And then because that is where you have we've seen and kind of sometimes we talk about it and people laugh about it or make comment about it. If I had that money, I wouldn't be sad. Well, what happens when you get a lot of stuff, and depending on what you had to pay to get the stuff, when I say how much of you did it cost you, what did you have to do to get it? Depending on what it is, that stuff actually creates empty void spots. If it's not proceeded with the Spirit of God, if you're not flourishing in your spirit before you flourish in wealth, you will. He said, "I wish that you would prosper as your soul prospers." That part has to come first, so that the other stuff is it just comes after. It is the end result of wealth, of happiness. But it's not the peace. It's not the core that actually makes you happy. So when we talk about she's going to read these two scriptures, when he talks about darkness moves on the face, if you get your life so structured where you're doing it your way and not God's way, at the end of it, it's going to be silence. There'll be no movement. There'll just be silence. There'll be darkness. There will be no satisfaction at the end of the day. What was the point of it all? So as you sometimes when you struggle and you're moving in the presence of God, and He has you in humble beginnings, and He's moving you down the process. The fact that God is talking to you is everything. The fact that He's rolling out and He's giving you plans and He's giving you things to do, and He's moving and developing your life and shaping it, taking form and speaking. He's speaking into your life just like He spoke into the earth. He is also speaking into your life just that same way. Just that very same way, in phases and in pieces. He is speaking He's speaking you into a universe. He is speaking you into the future. He's speaking life into your generations. He's building you out. He's building out generation upon generation upon generation. He's building a beautiful universe for you. So as you see Him doing it in the earth realm, God is a builder. He births, He constructs, He gives. He is a giver. The enemy is still kill and destroy. God is all of the things that bring life and the color that you have in your life. You have relationships with people have relationships with their children, but they don't really have relationships with their children. They just have the structural relationship of parent and child, but they have the structural biological relationship of parent and child, but there's no communication. There's no love. There's no sharing. There's no relationship. People, you want to have the substance that makes a thing a good thing. So when God is doing what God did in Genesis, He is doing in you the same way. And don't build up your life without Him, because it'll be that darkness on the face of the earth, and it'll just be dull, dim, gray, and dark. But when He is in it, it becomes a force. It becomes a legacy. It becomes a life. It has adventure. It has color. It has a future. It has anticipation. It's life. Heaven is the life. The life comes from heaven. All the stuff without the life is void. It's nothing. So what I'm getting to you to understand today is that the gifts are not more important than the gift giver. As you are receiving, and as God is giving you, and He's blessing you in your life and blessing things, the gift giver, the one that created the situation, that created the opportunities, that created those things, He is the thing to capture. He is the thing to hold on to. He's the thing to have. If you have to let go of something, let go of the gift, but it's like the goose and the egg. You can leave the egg, keep the goose, because the goose can lay another egg. Keep God above everything. Keep your relationship with Him above everything. And the gifts are wonderful, but He is more wonderful. He is the relationship with Him, and the fact that he when He says He's going to do something, and He's teaching you how to follow Him through things, and trust Him and go in through things with Him, is that He is the one that speaks light into darkness. He speaks life into death. He is life itself. He is that is the thing to have, to grasp onto. So and his movement. Because if he can be in your life, and if you have a disobedient life, He'll stand still. And we've all had that experience where God has told us to do something and we didn't do it, and we're still trying to walk around like nothing's wrong. And He said, "I told you to do something," and we don't do it. We ignore it, didn't say no, just didn't do it. You'll pray and you'll have no answer. You'll pray and it'll just be quiet. And then when you go back and say, "Okay, Lord," go back, dig up that well, what He told you to do, then the communication starts again. And that is what you want. You want to have a constant flow of communication with God. Is the most precious thing that you will have. And that's everything. It means everything. It is is God moving on the surface of the earth? Is God moving on the surface of your life? God moving in you and when He is moving on the surface of your life, He will call it out. That's when dull places come back to life, and life springs back, and He resurrects things. He moves things around. He causes growth. He is the one that Him moving on the face of the earth, on the face of your life. He is the one that causes the growth and the change, not you, and not in the getting, and not in the gifts, and not in the house, not in the car. You can have a home, You could have a car and still feel, you have heard people say, I got all this stuff and I still feel so empty. That's when we're talking about the darkness, moving on the empty, a void. That's we're talking about, a void. But the void, there's no void when God is, when you're communing with God, it's a constant birthing of wonderful, a constant birthing of Him moving. If there's needing to be, if there's healing needed, everything that's needed is in Him. So He is, this is what we're looking for. This is what all of you're getting. Make sure to hold on to the Lord with all that you will be achieving, with all that you'll be seeing and doing, and all that He'll be taking you through. The only thing that matters is Him, and then everything else is the side. Those are the side dishes. He's the main meal. He's it, and He is the one that you want to chase after and stay up under and listen to, and make sure that you don't get distracted by the gifts, but you are consistently staying attached to the gift giver. So, Gloria, go ahead and read yours, and then I'll come back and do the rest of it. And hold on, you might have to let me take you off of mute. Okay, go ahead, Gloria.
Amen. Reading Genesis 1 and 2. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Reading Mark 8:36 through 38. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words, this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when He comes in His Father's glory with the holy angels. Amen.
Amen. So when on that Genesis, on that first chapter, when He's talking about the earth was void, instead of earth, put in wealthy person or wealthy individual or a person that does not know God. And what happens is, in that space of voidness, that's when you have people that you fall into depression. That's when hold on one second. Hold on. That's when you have people that fall into depression, emptiness. When I say void, I'm trying to describe that to you. Void is an internal emptiness where there's like, why am I alive? What am I here to do? I don't feel love. I feel cold, even though I'm not cold on the physical. My soul feels cold. I feel like I'm a shell. I don't feel that void, the isolation. That is where people get to when they feel depressed, when they feel empty, and it's because things don't fill you up. God is what brings life. That's the joy, comes from Him. The fruit of the Spirit, that comes from Him. That's when people say, I give everything away just so that I can have, I don't care about the material things. I need to feel alive again. I need to have life. And that is where the life giver, the thing that God did, that's what we're talking about here. When we're telling people about the Lord, they're not just coming in to receive God so they don't go to hell. That's one thing. You want to be saved. But beyond being saved, He will reconstruct your whole thing. He'll reconstruct your life from the foundation up. He'll change things around. Sometimes you have situations where people will come together and say, I'm just going to help my family. I just want to pray for my family, my stuff, my individual thing. And then but the blessing is when you actually go outside of your stuff, your family, your immediate thing, and you start doing it for the world. You start doing it for bigger groups. You start doing it for cities. You start doing it for a nation. You start doing that prayer and giving and concern for the globe. You start having a bigger prayer because it's God moving on the face of the earth. He will do it. He will move wherever you are praying for him to move. If you're praying for an entire city, he'll move on the city. You're praying for your block, he'll move on your block. He'll move on your neighbor. You have plenty to be praying for, to be giving out and covering and putting hope into. But when you're sending it in, just like he said, let there be light. Use the same thing. When Jesus came, he was the light of the world. He is the light of the world. But when you are praying, you can send it out. You can start praying bigger prayers. You can start praying and covering bigger spheres of bigger regions, bigger things. You start praying. God can move. Just like if you imagine he moved back in Genesis, he can move on the face of the earth now the same way. He can move over, and the darkness that the enemy is putting in social structures can be pushed out, pushed away. You can shift and change. He can change things. So imagine today we are talking about all this that's happening in society and all the darkness and all the things that are happening that are counterproductive. They're causing people to, already the drug issues, the suicide rate, the things that are happening, that mankind is manifesting darkness. So just like God moved back on the earth when it was dark and void, he can move on humanity today when it is dark, becoming dark and void. We can revive. He can move and say, let there be light. He can move and put it back in there. We have to pray, speak it out, decree and declare, stand on the wall, pray these things down. And just like he moved at the beginning, he can move that out. It means over a period of series of nights and a series of days and a series of time and a season, God can have people thinking differently. Their minds can think differently. The shading of society can think differently. Right now, society is pushing towards darkness, emptiness, void, and then people even getting medicated to feel happy, to feel like they're alive. And when in fact it's a soul thing. It's a soul, it's an emptiness, and it's a void. And the fact, when you take God out, when we took prayer out of the schools, when you take God off of a territory, the only opposite, when you move God out, when you take life out, the only void is death. So any tools that get to death go into operation because there's nothing to stop it. So when you take prayer out of the school, you take prayer out of anything, you take God out of any system, and you take the godliness out of any system, the system will turn dark. It'll still run, but it's not running with light. It's going to run with darkness. It runs with the dimension of darkness. So what we want to do, we are the light, we are the salt of the earth. We're supposed to be putting the presence of God back into every single thing that is on the planet. The presence of God has to be there. If God doesn't move, there's nothing. If it's not, so we're not trying to, the separation of church and state and all that, the Lord said, render unto Caesar's what Caesar's. But at the end of the day, any system operating without God in it, without the joy and the peace, without love, without meekness, without the fruit of the Spirit, any system, anywhere, even, I'm going to give you an example. Let me write this down so I can make sure I talk about this. Any system that doesn't have love will ultimately turn dark. Anything, any room, any home. A home without love is a dark home. A job where you're not loving, people aren't loving and nice and kind and showing the fruits of the Spirit becomes a dreary place to go to. There's only love. There's love and light, or there's darkness and death. Those are the two choices. All that other stuff in the middle, it really doesn't amount to a hill of beans. When children are born, babies are born, if somebody doesn't pick them up and hug them and talk to them and rub on them and rock them, they don't know they're alive. They will die. Newborn babies, babies that are born with critical illness, they have nurses, they have people, professionals that come in there, and that's all they do is hug and rock the babies and let them. That's important. That represents life. That represents that I'm here. That God is moving on the surface of the planet. That's what that means. So we're not a small thing. We actually are. When he says we are the salt of the earth, we are the preservers. We are the ones that are keeping it from going dark. Think of it that way. We are the ones keeping the planet. and from mankind, the planet, from going dark, from everything turning into the dark realm, the enemy trying to take over. We want God to take over. In order for that to happen, he has to be in it. And it is our job, it is our duty to put him into every single thing that we possibly can. Put him in everything. He goes in everything. When you go to work, he's at your job. You're praying over the job. When you go to the grocery store, everything you do, every place you go, the light is being cast into the planet. You're blessing, you're praying over them, you're praying over the people. When you're talking to a person, you can't even talk to a single person without casting the love of God on them, talking about the love of God, giving. And if you don't say it out your mouth, it's in your action, it's in your demeanor. It is literally the breath of it is the thing that keeps people will be drawn to you and not know why, because they have a dreary, dull life, and then they see you over here with the happiness, the joy, and the peace and the fruit of the Spirit, and they're drawn towards you because they're drawn towards life. They're drawn towards the living. They're drawn towards the light that's in you, that is being reflected out into a space where there was nothing. So that's what we're going to read the rest of these scriptures, and then we're going to go back, and what we are going to ask and be praying today is that we have the presence of God is not only oozing and bubbling out of you, but you just beyond you just bubbling out of you. It is going and saturating your environment, and it's picking up recruits. Your life is having an effect on other people being drawn to the Lord. And then because it truly means there's only two choices, and I've said it on here. God has to move. He has to move on it. And if he doesn't move on it, it will die on the vine. It will be nothing. Only what God is moving in is what will live. Everything else is going to go out. It will be of nothing. Comes to no avail.